It is April of 1241, and you are standing on the eastern bank of the Sajo River in the Kingdom of Hungary. You are a knight. You have your horse, your armor, your sword. You are part of an army 100,000 strong, the combined forces of King Belafort of Hungary, the Knights Templar, the Knights Hospitaller, Croatian cavalry, and German crossbowmen. This is, by any measure, one of the most powerful armies assembled in Europe in a generation. You have been told the Mongols are coming. You've heard the stories, burnt cities, slaughtered populations, armies that appeared from nowhere and disappeared like smoke. But your commanders have scouted the terrain. You hold the bridge. The river protects your flank. You have superiority in numbers. Your position is strong. And then the Mongols hit you from three sides at once. Not from the east, where you were watching. From the flanks. From behind. From the gaps in your own formation that you didn't know existed. Within hours, your 100,000-man army is running, and the Mongols are not chasing you. They are herding you into a gap they left deliberately, and when you run through that gap, there are archers waiting. Thousands of them. By nightfall, 60 to 70,000 European soldiers are dead. The man who planned this was not Batu Khan, the Mongol prince who nominally led the campaign. Batu Khan got the glory. Batu Khan got the title. Batu Khan's name went into the history books. The man who actually designed the Battle of Mohi, who positioned every unit, who chose this specific river, this specific bridge, this specific gap, was a 65-year-old general who had to be carried to battle in a cart because he was too old and too heavy to ride a horse. His name was Subutai, Subuti, and he never lost a battle. Not once. In 60 years of war, across more countries than any general in history before the modern era, against armies from China to Hungary to Persia to Russia, Subutai never lost. You almost certainly don't know his name. That's where this story starts. Subutai was born around 1175 in the forests of what is now northern Mongolia into a clan of blacksmiths, not warriors, not nobles. His father pounded iron for a living. In a culture where your bloodline determined your rank, where the great war leaders were all descended from the steppe aristocracy, Subutai began at the very bottom. He joined Genghis Khan's service as a teenager. The stories say he arrived and declared himself a dog, not as an insult, but as a pledge. "I will be your dog" was an oath of absolute loyalty in Mongol culture. "Point me and I will hunt. I will not return until I bring back what you sent me for." Genghis Khan took the pledge seriously. He gave Subutai his first command in his 20s, and Subutai delivered, every time. By the time Genghis had united the Mongolian steppe under his banner in 1206, Subutai was already one of the 4 generals Genghis called his dogs of war. The Persian historian Rashid al-Din, writing a century later but drawing on Mongol court records, described these 4 men as the instruments through which Genghis Khan's ambitions became reality. Not advisors, not subordinates who carried out orders, partners in a project of conquest that neither fully understood yet. Here's what most people don't know about how the Mongols actually won. It was not numbers. At Mohi, the Mongols were outnumbered. At the Battle of the Sit River in 1238, they were outnumbered. At virtually every major engagement in Europe, the Mongol invasion force was smaller than the army it destroyed. The myth of the Mongol horde, this endless tide of warriors overwhelming by sheer weight, is largely wrong. The Mongols were never that numerous. They compensated with something else: speed, coordination, and above all, information. Subutai was the first general in history to build what we might now call a systematic intelligence operation. Before every major campaign, he sent scouts, sometimes merchants, sometimes diplomats, sometimes genuine spies, months or years in advance. These men studied the terrain. They mapped the roads. They identified the local politics, the feuds between kingdoms, the rulers who might be bought or intimidated. By the time Subutai's army arrived, he already knew the land better than many of the people who lived there. For the European campaign of 1240 to 1241, Subutai spent over a decade preparing. He studied the political divisions between Poland, Hungary, and the Holy Roman Empire. He identified that these kingdoms, despite being Christian neighbors, would not coordinate quickly enough to combine their armies. He planned to strike so fast, across so wide a front, that they would each be destroyed before they could call for help from the others. His plan worked exactly as designed. While Subutai destroyed the Hungarian army at Mohi on April 11th, another Mongol force under generals Baidar and Kadin, both following Subutai's plan, destroyed the Polish and German army at Legnica, 400 miles to the northwest, on April 9th. 2 days apart, 400 miles apart, no radio, no telephone, no way to coordinate in real time, and yet the timing was nearly perfect. Duke Henry the Pious of Silesia, commanding the Polish force, had been waiting for King Wenceslaus of Bohemia and his reinforcements. Wenceslaus was 1 day's march away, 25,000 soldiers who could have changed the outcome entirely. Subutai had calculated this. Baidar attacked before Wenceslaus could arrive. Henry was dead within hours. Wenceslaus turned back when he heard what happened. This is not luck. This is not ferocity. This is not the brute force that the word horde implies. This is precision. But to understand what made Subutai genuinely unlike any commander before him, you have to go back 17 years to a campaign that most history classes never mention. In 1221, Genghis Khan sent Subutai and a general named Jebe on what historians now call the Great Raid. Their official mission was to pursue Muhammad II, the Shah of Khwarezm, who had fled after Genghis destroyed his empire. Find him, kill him. Muhammad II died on a small island in the Caspian Sea before they could reach him. Subutai and Jebe had a choice: turn back. The mission was technically over. They kept going. What followed was one of the most audacious military operations in the ancient world. With a force of roughly 5,000 soldiers, Subutai and Jebe rode west and north through the Caucasus Mountains, through Georgia, through the Crimea, around the northern coast of the Black Sea, into the Russian steppe, and then turned south. They covered approximately 10,000 miles in roughly 4 years, fighting and winning engagements the entire way. They defeated the Georgian army twice. They defeated the Cumans, a powerful steppe confederation, by using a brilliant piece of psychological warfare. They sent gifts to the Cuman leaders and reminded them that Mongols and Cumans were both steppe peoples, unlike the Russian princes they'd been allied with. The Cumans backed off. The Russian princes, now fighting alone, were destroyed at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223. Then Subutai and Jebe turned around and rode home. No conquest, no occupation. They had completed a reconnaissance of everything from the Caucasus to the Russian steppe, had defeated every army that faced them, and had reported back to the Great Khan. Jebe died on the return journey, possibly of illness. Subutai returned to Mongolia, having seen more of the world than almost any living person, and then he waited. 15 years. While that information aged in his mind, while he fought other campaigns in China, while the Mongol Empire expanded and Genghis Khan died and Ogedei Khan took his place, Subutai filed away what he had learned about Europe. Here's the part nobody tells you. The Battle of Mohi was not a response to European aggression. It was not a retaliation. It was the execution of a plan Subutai had been developing since 1223. The European campaign was a premeditated survey turned invasion, planned instead. Now watch what happens after Mohi. April of 1241. The Hungarian army is gone. King Bela IV is fleeing across the Adriatic. The Mongol advance guard reaches the Danube River. On the other side, Austria. Beyond Austria, the soft heart of Europe. Subutai crosses the frozen Danube and makes camp on the western bank. He is 2 days hard riding from Vienna. Vienna has no idea what is coming. In the chronicles of the Holy Roman Empire, in the records of the papacy, in the letters sent between European monarchs during this period, you find fear unlike anything they had expressed before. Pope Gregory IX called for a crusade, not against Muslims this time, but against the Mongols. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II began mobilizing. Britain's King Henry III wrote to the King of Norway asking if it was possible to sail far enough north to escape. That is how serious Europeans thought this was. And then, Ogedei Khan, son of Genghis, ruler of the Mongol Empire, died. He died of a drinking problem in December of 1241 in Mongolia, thousands of miles away. Under Mongol tradition, all the princes had to return to the capital for the Kurultai, the great assembly where a new Khan would be chosen. Batu Khan was a prince. He had to go home. Subutai turned his army around. Not because Europe stopped him, not because any army pushed him back, because a man in Mongolia drank himself to death. Europe was saved by a death. Subutai was, by this point, approximately 65 years old. He had fought in campaigns in China, Persia, the Caucasus, Russia, Poland, and Hungary. He had won every time. He would live for 7 more years. He would fight one more campaign in China, helping Ogedai's successor Gyuk consolidate the Eastern Empire. Still undefeated. He died around 1248, probably in his early 70s, of old age. In a world where most soldiers died in battle and most generals died of betrayal or disease on campaign, Subutai died in his bed. The most successful commander in the history of the ancient world, and he outlived almost everyone he fought. The Secret History of the Mongols, the oldest surviving piece of Mongolian literature, compiled shortly after Genghis Khan's death, names Subutai as one of the great Khan's most valued men. It records his oath. It records his campaigns. It records his name. Almost nobody in the West has read it. And here is where the story becomes about more than one general. Think about the names you know from ancient military history. You know Alexander the Great. You know Julius Caesar. You know Hannibal. You might know Sun Tzu, Napoleon, the Duke of Wellington. These are the commanders your history education gave you. Now think about what those commanders have in common. Almost all of them, the ones your textbooks centered, came from Europe or from the Western Asian world that fed into European history. The ones who came from elsewhere were mentioned when they interacted with Europe, like Hannibal, or when they were useful for a lesson about European ideas, like Sun Tzu for management seminars. Subutai doesn't appear in most Western military history education because he never actually occupied Europe. He touched its edges. He turned around before he got to the interesting parts of the story from Europe's perspective. So he fell through the cracks. This is not an argument that Subutai was more important than Alexander. This is not a claim that Asian history matters more than European history. This is not about points in some competition between civilizations. This is a simple observation. The most successful battlefield commander in the history of the ancient world is not in your mental model of great commanders. And the reason he isn't there has nothing to do with his record. The record is unambiguous. 65 battles, 0 defeats, more territory covered than any general of his era. A planning methodology that would not be replicated in the West until the 20th century. Campaigns conducted across geography and climate ranges that broke other armies. He just happened to fight for an empire that history decided to remember as a catastrophe rather than a civilization. 3 things to take from Subutai's story. The first is this: strategy defeats force. Every army Subutai faced had advantages he didn't. More soldiers, better fortifications, home terrain, defensive positions. He won anyway, not by hitting harder, but by seeing more clearly, by knowing the battlefield before he arrived, by designing the conflict rather than reacting to it. Whatever field you're in, the lesson holds. The person who prepares most thoroughly rarely has the most obvious advantages. They just know the terrain. The second, history is shaped as much by the questions we ask as by the events themselves. We ask who fought Alexander, and Europe fills the frame. We ask who stopped the Mongols, and we hear about Japanese typhoons and Egyptian Mamluks. We rarely ask who built the Mongol military machine, because that question leads us to Subutai, and Subutai leads us to a story that doesn't center any civilization we were taught to center. The shape of the history you learned is not neutral. It was designed by people who were asking specific questions. Start asking different questions, and different people come into focus. The third is the one I want you to sit with. Subutai swore an oath as a teenager. I will be your dog. Point me and I will hunt. He spent the next 60 years honoring that oath. Through the deaths of Khans, through the collapse of dynasties, through campaigns that lasted years and covered continents. He asked for no monument. He built no city in his name. He did not write his memoirs. The only record of his inner life is a line in a Mongolian chronicle that most people have never read. He died in his bed, old, undefeated, and almost entirely unknown to the civilization he came closest to destroying. Somewhere in the grasslands of modern Mongolia, there is no tomb for Subutai, no statue, no school named after him. The Mongols buried their dead in secret, without markers, so enemies couldn't find them and take revenge on their bones. His grave has never been found. He left behind no monument except the outcomes: battles won, cities taken, empires shaped, and a record that still stands 800 years later as the most extraordinary military career in the ancient world. That's the part of history that school never taught you. If you found this story worth watching, subscribe, because this is exactly what this channel exists to do. Every week, we go back into the histories that got left out of the Western education and pull out the people who should have been there all along. And before you go, I want to know, if you could have served in any